Hi folks watching from home. So I will be talking about planning large-scale events in this session, so thanks for joining me today or in the future whenever you watch it. So we'll be talking about the sophistication spectrum and how we move events from being just like quick spur of the moment or low-level planning, low-level of intentionality, to moving to a place of higher sophistication and higher intentionality in the events. We'll talk about this concept of significant events, walk through timeline framework for planning a successful large-scale event, as well as what it would look like on the tail end to assess the program, evaluate it, and move forward. Here are the learning objectives, just hoping that you understand what the spectrum of sophistication spectrum is and how it relates to significant events, the role that assessment post an event plays, as well as learning the framework for executing an event. So this asks for some participation, so I pose this question: how do we plan something despite the long to-do list that students may have, paired with the opportunities that are offered on campus in the city of Spokane on any given day? What do we do to entice students to come to our events?
Make sure you ask your residents what they want, so you're planning things that they'll actually come to.
Okay. So really catering to the students' wants and needs.
Doing that at strategic times, so hall meetings and door to door knock and talks are really helpful in your market research, but also like having a rubric of what you want to touch on and then taking track of like this many people want these kind of events, and then also like the monthly issues that might arise, paying attention to different trends in your specific area of service wherever you are.
Yep, so intentionality in terms of soliciting that feedback on students' needs, whether that's through hall meetings, through one-on-ones, interactions with students day to day. What else might we consider?
Like focusing on scheduling, especially for campus-wide and then also citywide. If it's like a big citywide event, like planning things in February on a Thursday night isn't a good plan because that's when we have basketball games probably. But like Thursday night in April might be really good because we don't have basketball games, but people have their schedule cleared for basketball games earlier in the semester. So like keeping in mind things like that.
Great. So being aware of what's going on campus, citywide, nationally. Great, I really appreciate it. So here are some of the elements that I think about is that this has to be more than just the food. We often use food to as that carrot to invite and encourage students to participate. Sometimes that incentive isn't enough. So the idea of a sophisticated event is that there's some sort of element that it's more than just having fun. It's more than just the food. How do we have this concept of edutainment? How do we pass on some learning, some sort of knowledge acquisition, some sort of experience that might be transformative on a small scale or a large scale without students even realizing or feeling like they're learning in that moment? We hope that people will be talking about the event after they leave that space or that event. And if you were to host this event again in the future, people would be excited about it because they heard other people get excited about it previously, or they attended it the previous year. And so when they see the advertisements again, they're like, yep, I'm going, no questions asked. So significant events are large-scale events, whether they are campus-wide, whether they're block-wide, but when we in Housing and Residence Life will be talking about significant events moving forward, we are talking about at least block-wide programs that are being offered. We're hoping that these turn into traditions, and so examples of current significant events that we already host and that are part of our culture here on campus are the Bulldog Bowl hosted between DeSmet and CM, as well as the Cremont Haunted House. And so we have been tasked and we've been given this call to create more programs that will become traditions on campus and will get people excited to live on different blocks or in different buildings as well. And at the heart of this is that it requires a lot of planning. It's not just something that you can think about in 10 minutes, go shopping once, and you're good to go. There's a significant amount of planning to go into an event in order for it to be considered a significant event. This is a quick roadmap of how I think about large-scale planning, and so I think of these really large moments are like this idea formation. So this moment of conceptualizing an event or a theme or something, a lot of creativity goes into this realm. You're paying a lot of attention to student needs, the trends of the month, trends that you might see in a first-year student, trends you might see with a sophomore or second-year student, trends you might see with our juniors, seniors who are getting ready to transition into life after college, and you're taking those into account. You're thinking about what movies, what music, what is being talked about in the news, what are the pop culture events that are happening. You're thinking about national political movements, you're thinking about all of these different influences that will impact the context and may influence where our students are at. The second large step of this framework for planning event is the actual planning stage, and a lot goes in here. So you've moved from this like planting a seed and it's sprouting. We're talking about actually adding some fertilizer and some dirt and watering this seed so that it'll sprout into something big. And in this planning stage, we see different elements here. So if it is a really large scale event, hopefully you're not planning it alone and you have a team that you can lean on. And so here you're figuring out what are the different elements of an event, delegating and collaborating amongst your internal team to figure out who's going to be responsible for different aspects of the job. You're creating a marketing plan, so it's not just flyers, but what can you do on social media? What can you do in terms of knock and talks? Is this something that can go into morning mail? Is this something that you can put into as activities as an event? Is this something that you can buy those large posters that hang in Hemmingson? Is it something that you can put on a sandwich board out front of Crosby or Hemmingson? Or is it something that you can put floor advertisements? They're these really neat ways to advertise where you get some plastic covers and you can buy or you can just put posters down on the ground and people will be like, oh, I've never walked over a poster before, and so they might stop and think about there's a poster on the floor, it caught my attention. They might realize that something's going on. How can we creatively market events to our students? In this stage, you also have budget inquiries. And so something that's really important is to think about your overall project, your overall event that you're planning. How much are the different aspects of the event going to cost? This might take some research, looking into if you're bringing outside vendors in, how much do they cost for whatever service they're providing, as well as labor or mileage to drive in their services, how much do they pay their employees who are going to be setting up. You'll need to think about, do we need to pay for a space? Are we getting food? How much does food cost? Are there other entertainment aspects, educational aspects of this event that may cost some money, and really take those into consideration? And you all know this process, but for the benefit of just reminders of you need to request monies from your supervisors and then submit PO forms, purchase order forms, or work on creating a plan with the supervisor to use a PO or journal entry if it's with somebody on campus. So just a reminder to really think about budget and making sure that we are being really ethical with the amount of money that we're spending, so that we are good stewards of the money that we are spending. When we move on from overall logistics, delegation, to budget inquiry, to creating this marketing plan, it's important to also consider risk management, and I think this is something that we have a lot of room to improve on at Gonzaga, is really considering collaborating with our risk management department. Is there a need for to consult with risk management, or a need to have waivers present at this activity is something really important to think about, especially when we're doing larger scale events where people might be active or they might be interacting in a new environment and such, is something really important to think about. And so meeting with risk management, meeting with our campus partners, meeting with the partners outside of campus who might be coming in and collaborating with them is really important. This smaller dot there that I have is the confirmation stage, and this is post-planning, post-initial reach out. So like, let's say planning started 2 to 3 to 5 months ahead of an event. This confirmation stage is in the weeks leading up to the event, and you're just confirming with your campus partners, you're confirming with outside partners that they're still good to go. See if there's any way that you can support them, since they're doing us a huge service by coming in. What directions do they need? Do they need parking passes to park on campus? Is that something that we can go reach out to campus security for? Is there a way that we can cover meals for them? Is there something that they need to make it a more enjoyable experience for them so that it's in turn a more enjoyable experience with us? Thinking about those logistics and those last minute details. I think it also means sitting down with our planning committee for these events and running through day of logistics. I think that this is a good point to also think about rain check plans if you hadn't already thought about those rainy day details. If you hadn't thought about them before, is okay, what if something goes wrong? What is our contingency plan? Do we have an alternative location? Do we have an alternative event if one of our service providers can't come in? Let's say that something we had originally planned isn't working out really well. What can we do instead so that we can still provide this space for education, this space for fun, this space for whatever event that looks like, and just kind of running through those details. Who's taking the point on communicating this aspect? Who is emceeing the event? Who's kind of behind the scenes working on running last minute errands if we realize that we forgot something and we need something last minute the day of? Really kind of figuring out who's responsible for what is really important. The next big touch point is the event itself. And I think that there's some hesitation sometimes when we think about these larger scale events, is that they are often very stressful, anxiety driven, and I think it's really important to remind ourselves that even as organizers of larger scale events, it's important to have fun and to make the most of that experience, as well as what you're facilitating for the students. And so enjoy the event, make it run. I think there's a huge need to be adaptable in the day of the actual event. Something might not go exactly as planned, so how can we really quickly scramble or appear to be calm, and in our scramble to figure out what the next step is really important. Post-event, we'll move into this assessment phase, and it can happen literally as students or participants are leaving the event. Is there a quarter sheet of paper that you can have them really quick jot down some thoughts or rank some sort of assessment questions, Likert scale, excuse me. Or is it something that you've had somebody check in on through his activities? Once we start tracking folks online, there's this really neat feature that you can send a prompt for them to fill out an assessment through his activities, and so then you can do that electronically so that the next time they get online or the next time that they open up their email, they'll see that assessment really quick. I think to close the loop on planning an event, it's really important to the team to come back together and reflect on the overall experience. Really go over and think through the planning phases as well as the actual day of event, and review the assessment and come up with some takeaways from the event. What went well? What didn't go so well? If this is going to be a traditional event that will be hosted year to year, can we create a transition report for our students or for our next group so that we can better implement this program the next time around? Things to consider, we mentioned some of these, is what's going on around campus, what's going around in the city of Spokane, what's going on in Washington, what's going on the television. Is it a major awards night? Is it February or March and we're in the middle of March Madness for basketball? Is it Super Bowl Sunday, probably not good times to program. Might be, you never know, but just things to consider. I think it's important to think about what students are experiencing. Again, we talked about those phases of life. And something that we need to improve on as well is thinking about the accessibility of our events. Physically, emotionally, are our events accessible to our students? Is the nature of our events as inclusive as it could be, or do some students hear what the event is and they're like, not for me? Or is it in this predominant ZAG culture, and we have some ZAGs who don't feel like they're a part of the ZAG culture? Or how can we create an event that might be accessible to all of our students? I think it's important to reflect on, is our marketing material really telling of what's going to happen, or is it misleading? I think that's something that we need to think about. And I also think about sometimes the step of needing to RSVP can be really good because you have some buy-in from students to ensure that they will actually be coming, but it could also be a step that's making it not as accessible for folks if they feel like they need to submit some money, or if they need to if there's some sort of attire, like why do I need to RSVP for this event? If it's something that I need to RSVP for, are my friends RSVPing? I'm gonna sign up for this if I don't know that my friends are headed that way as well. So as I've talked through this, from your lens as RAs, ARDs in the room, what is the importance of assessment after or following an event or a program?
I think it's important to take time and look at what went well and what didn't go as well. Keep what worked and make that a significant event moving forward. But there's little things that can get lost in translation, and then sharing it on a larger scale into like the housing and residence life community just makes everything else better. So I know we're optimizing like back-end housing stuff. So on an RA level, we could optimize event planning and communication materials like Canva that work extremely well. That I don't know if that's popular knowledge or just like polling and stuff that works, like stuff that we know sticks, sharing that, because at the end of the day, people are working hard, and I've learned stuff from people 3 years ago, and I just want to continue that going so we can better connect with residents.
It allows us to reflect on aspects that went well and not so well, as I mentioned earlier. I think that, Kevin, you hit this on the nose, that it allows us to improve these programs for the future as well. And it allows us to tell our story. In this, and by this I'm saying that it allows us to ask for more money in the future, especially if one aspect went really well, but there was a huge line to do a certain activity. If we had $2,000 more, could we double the actual activity that's offered and reduce the waiting time for students and keep people entertained at an actual event? Sometimes we can't do that if we don't have the numbers to prove that we actually need more money for that. And it also allows us to make informed decisions for how we proceed. So this might be after like a small scale event or program, but sometimes from assessment, we might learn how we're not being inclusive. We might learn that our marketing was effective or not effective. This might tell us that the event was a huge success, and so we need to do it again exactly as it was, if possible. Or there are small things here and there where we can tweak things, and we don't know that if we don't assess. We're gonna walk through an actual example now. So we'll use a previous example, since there's only one block in here, and I don't want to call them out to give their example as of now. But an example of a large-scale event that I've seen hosted at a previous institution revolving around the Hunger Games. One of the residence halls on the campus hosted a week-long series of events that were related to the Hunger Games, revolving around the time that the latest movie, I forget which one in the series, it was being released at that time. But the idea formation happened during a staff meeting, staff retreat, and like what was coming out, what was something that a lot of students were talking about, and it was Hunger Games, and we saw this phenomenon similar to like Harry Potter, about everybody getting excited when the Harry Potter books or movies were being released. We saw that on our campus community with the Hunger Games, And so this idea of actually having like a Hunger Games tournament between the different floors in the building came forth. And so instead of one person representing overall, you had like teams representing your various communities, and we created this really accessible event for people who wanted to be physically active. They were down on like a turf field competing, and folks who were not wanting to be as physically active got to sit on like the hanging track above this turf field, and they were able to complete some like trivia questions or do some like Sudoku races or like crossword puzzle races, and whoever finished them first got to buy their like tributes down on the turf extra powers. And so like we had people who were the the trackers, like the wasps. I forget exactly. Tracker jackers, thank you. We had 2 or 3 people who volunteered to be tracker jackers, and so they were running around with like dodgeballs. And so if a tracker jacker hit one of your teammates or like you had to sit and spin for 30 seconds before you were like allowed to continue to participate. And it was like a mix between ultimate frisbee and like capture the flag, football, like dodgeball. And so we had a lot of people involved physically and on this intellectual event, and that was like the pinnacle of our event. So that was like the Thursday, Friday event. But on the Monday, we had a like tribute banquet. So we literally like catered a meal for our entire residence hall. The staff dressed up in various like costumes related to the Hunger Games and hosted the event. One of the days we had like a ceremony to figure out who the tributes were going to be, and so we like hosted an event in one of the common spaces, and the different floors got to introduce their tributes who were going to be competing, and how they were planning on like preparing their students and stuff. We had a ball as well, and so we hosted a nighttime dance with like a DJ, and decorated a cafeteria near the residence hall so that the students could have like a fun late night activity and go dancing, all in preparation for this event. So that was the conceptualization. Planning happened in like a November retreat for a March release. So literally 3 to 4 months in advance, we started talking about this event. In the planning stages, we decided who was going to take on which responsibilities, and we had different leads for each of the different events. And so they would act as the point of contact, but then they would also recruit other members from our team to fill some of the smaller tasks related to those overall events. We created marketing plans that included like a movie trailer-esque thing to send out to our students, some social media pieces, emails, as well as just like different flyers that were going up into the residence halls. We had a nice budget as well, and so we were able to cater the meal pretty easily, but our equivalent to Sodexo was really gracious, and they did a good job of like bringing down costs and trying to go with our theme. We were like, this is what we're thinking. They had some folks in the kitchens who were super creative, and so they created some fun snacks at a discounted rate for us to include as like hors d'oeuvres, and then some meals that were just kind of like futuristic, I guess you could say, in the way that they were presented. And so we started working with our campus partners about December, January, to start some of that planning. Marketing started coming out in February, about a month before when those videos started to come out, and flyers showed up about 2 weeks prior to the actual event, so that there were these little teasers of like, this is what's to come, and we had the RAs getting really excited about the event and chatting about what was going on. Confirmations happened with our equivalent to Sodexo the week prior, make sure that delivery and everything was set up. We confirmed with our equivalent to Rudolph Fitness Center to make sure that our courts were still reserved, that we had everything we needed on our end. We walked through at our staff meeting previous to this actual event, like we touched base with each point of contact to kind of walk through their event and know what our roles were in each of those various events and what the roles of our peers were. The actual events went really well, so much so because we had stuff in writing that we had a few folks who were away for interviews, for graduate schools, and they were able to host the events because the planners had done such a good job of saying, like, these are the logistics, these are the rules for these events, or this is the contingency plans, that we were able to hand over this packet and let somebody else run the events if that point of contact was out. And then we did a little bit of assessment and reflection, and it actually did turn into a like recurring event each time the next like Hunger Games movie came out. They hosted it a few more times, which I think is really cool. And it wasn't like a year-to-year event, but there was enough talk and buzz on the campus that even if a year or two passed from the event, that it went really well. That was a quick overview, but just a few reminders for you as RAs, like, you are not alone. You have your staff of 12 to 15 RAs, 8 RAs, your supervisors, block council, RHA, and other campus partners when planning these events. Teamwork, collaboration, and delegation are your best friends in large-scale program planning. I think that it's easier to have like 3 to 5 people who are really devoted to an event to be like the lead committee planners, instead of having an entire staff. Yes, you can have an entire staff kind of input their ideas and thoughts initially and be support in different capacities, but when you have too many people at the table to make decisions, sometimes a lot of people's egos get in the way, or they have different ideas of where the event should go, and so sometimes it's just easier to make a plan and share the instructions and directions to other folks. Some simple ways to kind of think about who can do what is you could have somebody in charge of the financial aspects. So they'll do POs, they will do the budget inquiries and requests, and they will follow through with purchase orders on the back end. You could have another person who's in charge of the day of logistics. You could have somebody who's in charge of all the administrative work, shopping, preparation, campus partner outreach that happens beforehand, and you could have another person who's just kind of like a floater and does whatever everybody else needs. Are some examples of different ways that you can go about delegating up the tasks. And a few things to think about is large-scale programs can be more attractive to some of our students who are a little bit timid, because then they can choose who they're interacting with compared to smaller scale events where there might only be 5 to 10 people. There's more pressure to be present, more pressure to be talking. But large-scale events can also be less attractive to some folks if it's overwhelming to be surrounded by a lot of people. And so this is just speaking to that inclusivity piece there as well. Just a few things to think about. What questions or concerns do you all have?
How might you deal with the stress of possible failure?
I think that's something that we need to talk about as staffs ahead of time, and have contingency plans too. Because I think if we have a plan B for the actual overall plan, if it's already set in place and you have an idea of what those failure options could be, then it won't feel like as much of a failure if you have an alternative route. And I think you also need to define what does success look like before you start talking about or thinking about failure, because that might be different staff to staff. It might be different to the community. What might be successful in one community might look very different from what is successful in a different community. And so I think it's kind of defining as a team what that success will look like and not relying on outside pressures. So what other questions or concerns do we have? Alrighty, thanks folks. I'll be around if you have any questions, and same for folks back home. So have a good one, y'all. Go Zags.